Talk about with you, Elena. Who are these undecided voters then?
Well, overwhelmingly, polls say they're people who describe themselves as being in the centre of politics. So there's clearly a space in the middle where people can't quite work out what they should do. Now, back in 2007, of course, a startling 18% of voters went for this man, centrist candidate François Bayrou. He's not doing particularly well this time round, though, with polls showing him at less than 10% in some surveys. So if there is a space in the centre, as some polls show, he's not really cleaning it up. Does that mean he's becoming increasingly irrelevant, though? Well, Le Figaro argues in its editorial that he remains as relevant as ever, and Sarkozy and Hollande's campaign teams know that he is, because they're both bombarding him with phone calls to try and get his endorsement between the two rounds. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get it, though, even though Sarkozy's team have gone as far as offering him the job of Prime Minister. Le Canard Enchaîné, the satirical newspaper, has a look at what they think, at least, his strategy for between the two rounds is. Now, they think that he's actually betting on Sarkozy losing badly, and then the UMP, which his party, Sarkozy's, of course, which started life as a kind of diverse coalition of right-wing groups, would then implode, and Bayrou could create his own much bigger centrist party from those elements of the Sarkozy's party that are more moderate.
As you said, though, it is looking increasingly likely he is going to come in third. It's far-left candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon and Marine Le Pen, who we just saw. They're fighting that out, aren't they?
Yes, on the front page of communist paper L'Humanité today, which absolutely backs Mélenchon all of the way. They've got the headline, "Let's kick Marine Le Pen out of the game." Of course, Mélenchon and Marine Le Pen fighting hand-to-hand combat now over a particular group of voters, mostly the younger, the more working class, the people who otherwise wouldn't come out to vote at all or might be tempted towards, as I said, Marine Le Pen's voters. Mélenchon has been fighting them on her very own territory, if you like. If she tells them that they don't have any jobs and can't get to the end of the month because immigrants have taken them, he tells them it's the fault of the world financial system. And both of them are doing quite well among those voters. Mélenchon supposedly better, if you believe recent polls. He's also, L'Humanité says, fulfilling an important role that the socialists have avoided, which is defending ethnic minorities in France against the attacks they've had, both from people within Sarkozy's UMP and from Marine Le Pen. The socialists haven't really come out and said, you know, the variety of nationalities in France is a good thing. Mélenchon is doing that, which is why he's also motivating ethnic minority voters who might otherwise not bother coming out to vote. Canard Enchaîné also reckons they've got his secret strategy for between the two rounds. They say he's going to, after it, tell Hollande that he needs to call a referendum on that European budget treaty.
Well, as Elena said, then the candidates are working out how to court each other after Sunday's first round vote then, but they still haven't closed the deal with voters. Let's bring in Professor Jim Shields from Aston University. Thanks very much for being with us once again, Professor Shields. Why can't that 22% decide then?
Well, I think there is a wider picture than the 22%. If you look at a number of recent polls, there was one showing that abstention could be as high as 32%. That is a third of those eligible to vote. Then there is the quarter of the electorate that haven't yet made up their minds. And another poll showed that in the last 6 months, 1 in every 2 voters has changed their mind about who they might support in the first round. So I think all of these polls together suggest a very high degree of volatility in the electorate. And they also hang a big warning sign over other results that they predict, since these will be subject to last-minute vote switching or even abstaining by those undecided voters.
Whose fault's this then? I mean, the campaign's been called shrill, it's been called shallow, it's been said it's lacking substance. It's their own fault, isn't it?
Well, that could be argued. You could also say that it's part of the wider context of voting nowadays. I mean, this is a pattern that started to develop in the 1980s and continued in the 1990s. The mobility of the electorate, the volatility, the porousness of borders between some candidates. I think it also shows the decline of traditional partisan attachments and an increasing approach to voting as a form of consumerism with much less brand loyalty than before.
But if voting is consumerism, there's a lot of polls or surveys saying that voters aren't very happy with the menu. It's the topics that the candidates are choosing to talk about that aren't inspiring them.
That's right. The polls do show a disjuncture between what the candidates want to talk about and what is of most concern to the electorate, or at least parts of the electorate. If you look at those who've not made up their minds about voting, they tend to be young voters. They tend to be working class voters. They tend to be not particularly well educated or interested in politics, and they particularly do not feel that this campaign has connected with them.
Do you think then that big numbers will stay away from polls come voting day on Sunday?
Well, this is a real issue. I mean, that poll that I cited that suggests that as many as a third of the electoral register could abstain, that would be a record. And among those who are as yet undecided but who say they will vote, well, some of them may not vote, because often those who abstain are those who failed to select their candidate before the election and who therefore have less motivation to go and vote when they've no commitment to a particular candidate or programme. Some, of course, hesitate through a genuinely reasoned indecision, but others simply don't connect with those competing for election and therefore with the election itself.
Jim Shields, good to get your views this morning. That's Jim Shields from Aston University. Thanks very much for being with us on Campaign Chronicles, and thanks, of course, to Elena as well. More Campaign Chronicles tomorrow. Coming up next, it's going to be time for culture. How do you know, whether an action-packed French film